Hey everyone, and thank you for taking the time to check this out. The purpose of these videos, and it's going to be a series of short videos, is to just provide a supplement of instruction for single case design. So at the University of West Florida, measurement and single case design, experimental analysis of behavior, and or advanced single case design. So we're going to be covering a couple of different things, but these just generally serve as a good review for those of you that are preparing for the exam or enrolled in one of those types of courses. But it's not meant to supplement anything, and that's an important point to think about. So this shouldn't supplement any faculty instruction or anything else. It should be used in conjunction with. So in these videos, and each one of these will have its own video, we'll cover baseline, the AB design, the multiple baseline design with variations, the changing criterion design, and the alternating treatments design. So let's jump into the first part, which would be baseline. But before we do, just remember a couple of things you should already have a good understanding of. Measurement types, both continuous and discontinuous. So that would be things like count, duration, latency for continuous measures, and all the percentage measures such as partial interval, whole interval, momentary time sampling, so on and so forth. You should also have a pretty good understanding of what data collection looks like and how it works. And you should also have a good understanding of how to create and understand, in the event that you're collecting data yourself, operational definitions. So assuming you have a good understanding of all of that, the following video should help in preparation for one, conducting these designs in supervision or at your place of employment, as well as prepare you for the certification exam or prepare you for your class. So the items that will be covered, and I included both here because we're kind of in a weird transition period. If you're taking the exam in the 4th edition task list, we'd be covering B04 through B09. And if you're covering the 5th edition task list, it would be content items D3 and D5. After you've viewed these videos, the next thing you should be checking out or looking at is data displays, graphing, and analyzing data. Well, why do you need to know those things? Well, if you notice, at least I can speak for the University of West Florida, the scope and sequence seems to be understand measurement and understand how to create an operational definition. Then it's how to apply those things with different experimental designs, which we're going to cover here. And then after that, it's putting those things on data displays, graphing all the different types of graphs we use in behavior analysis, as well as analyzing data and making decisions, right? Because that's really the crux of what we do. So if you are enrolled, if you are viewing this video and you are currently enrolled in the University of West Florida and you are in single case or EAB or advanced single case, your main point of contact would obviously be your instructor. It would be most relevant. If you're viewing this video off of Facebook or the Ruiz ABA Facebook group, feel free to email me at sruiz@uwf.edu. But overall, I hope that you find this helpful. So let's talk about baseline. Baseline does a couple of things. First, it serves as the comparison to evaluate the effects of an intervention or a treatment package. So we always talk about in the literature that we know all these things work really well, and we know these things are evidence-based. Well, how do we know? Well, in the baseline condition of any type of design, the baseline is what lets us know if something works. We need something to compare it to. Further, we have this concept baseline logic, which suggests that if nothing is done, in other words, there's no intervention on the behavior, that behavior will continue on a similar level and trend. And we'll take a look at what that looks like. But we need a baseline to determine if what we are doing is working. And you might ask yourself, well, as a practitioner, why do I care if what I'm doing is working? Well, you care for a number of reasons. One, you might want to replicate that in the future for other students or other folks that you work with. Two, you want to know how well something works. Sometimes, as a general thing in behavior analysis as well as education, we don't want to do more than we need to. So we want to know if something works and how well something works. And baseline is the first thing that we have at our disposal to know how to do that. So when you think about a baseline and what an ideal baseline looks like, there's going to be little to no trend. So the data aren't going to be moving up or down very much. There's going to be little to no variability, and the level is going to be pretty stable. You want to do that because whatever you implement, whether it's to decrease a behavior or increase a behavior, you're going to want the baseline to be as stable as possible to be able to determine how well the thing you did worked. It's also worth noting that variable data in the baseline conditions suggests inconsistencies in the environmental contingencies. So you want to make sure those things are there and those things are there well. So just some general guidelines about baseline. One, as far as the length, people in clinics and schools and such will always provide some sort of general rule, at least in my experience. But the reality of it is baseline needs to be as long as it needs to be, but not really any longer than that. We don't want to be in a baseline condition for 20 days in a row. We want to be there enough to develop a stable level trend and have it be stable across. And then we want to implement our treatment. When you're in the baseline condition, you want to consider the target behavior that you're measuring for obvious reasons, right? You can't have a good comparison if you don't know what you're measuring. You want to be aware of any confounding variables or extraneous variables, things in the environment that either you have to remove or keep constant. And you also want to make sure that the data collection procedures are good. Why do you want to do that? Well, if data collection is inconsistent, then your baseline is going to be inconsistent. But what you really want to do is, this is the foundation of whatever you're going to do next in terms of intervention. So you want to make sure that things are running consistently, and you have thought about these things when developing what you're going to do next. This is the time to do that. So if you notice that you developed an operational definition and you ask folks to start taking baseline data and everyone's getting very different numbers, well, a couple of things could be going on, but one of the things you should be looking at is, well, maybe I need to modify this operational definition. And now would be the time to do that, make any changes, and then go back to it. So here is a sample baseline, and you'll notice, although we just spent some time, and this is from Powell and Nelson, 97, out of the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, we talked about stable level trend and stability overall. And you could tell here in the no choice or the baseline condition, where it's highlighted there in the first phase, undesirable behavior. What you'll notice there is it is not stable at all, right? It's bouncing up and down a lot in that first no choice phase. If you notice, it's actually also pretty lengthy, 8 sessions of baseline data according to the graph here. So that meant that there was some inconsistencies that they needed to figure out. They were looking to reduce the percentage of intervals where undesirable behavior occurred. But they have enough baseline data there to make a determination that the choice condition was effective. Now, we're going to cover this design in more detail in a later video, but just so you get the general sense here, notice what these researchers did. They developed an operational definition. They had a baseline condition, which didn't include choice. They collected some data on it. And then once they got enough data, even though it's not ideally stable, they implemented a choice condition. Just a note. Here's another sample baseline, and this is from another design that we're going to talk about in a later video. But the sample baseline there, if you notice, there's different interventions there. There's giving positive feedback, negotiating, resisting peer pressure, giving negative feedback, and then accepting negative feedback. And this comes from Schumacher, Sherman, and Sheldon in 1991 out of the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. And you notice that these baseline conditions are a bit more steady, right? There's not a lot of variability going on. Things are kind of the way they should be. And in this particular case, that's kind of what you're looking for. And again, we'll review the multiple baseline in another video. Here's just yet another example of a baseline. I'm showing you so many because baselines look different for different things. Less important about what the rest of the features are in the graph, more important that you focus on the baseline. But if you notice here, they're measuring 2 different things. Again, in this particular study from Research in Autism Spectrum Disorders, the citation is below the graph. Notice that the baseline one, there's not a lot of variability going on. There's 3 data points in the first baseline for each thing that they're measuring there, and then there's 6 in the second. But notice that there's not a lot of variation in the amount of times it's happening or not happening. And notice that the level stays very consistent in each data pad. That's a good baseline. So when I go to implement whatever the intervention is, I can say, okay, well, if I see some dramatic effects and I've controlled for those extraneous variables, it's likely that whatever I did worked well. So after this brief video, you should be able to describe the purpose of baseline, which again, just to review, is it serves as a comparison for treatment conditions. You should be able to identify a baseline condition on a graph. And you should also be able to identify what is required of a baseline before the implementation of treatment, which is a data collection system, an operational definition, and control for extraneous or confounding variables. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself at sruiz@uwf.edu. If you are viewing this on Facebook, or if I happen to be your measurement and single case design instructor, please feel free. If not, and you're enrolled at the UWF, please feel free to reach out to your instructor with any questions. And we will be covering a new segment and another video. We'll be looking at ABAB designs. Thank you. Have a good one.